Working with the audio today is going to require us to use the HTML audio tag. So with the HTML audio tag, we're able to then set a source inside that tag. And currently I'm just linking to a single audio file. But when you use the HTML audio tag, you're able to specify multiple sources for the sound file that you want. So you can have it recorded in an MP3 format, a WAV format. You can have it in the OGG format. So you can address the different browser needs for the different audio formats, and all you have to do is list multiple sources. So you'll just have source and then source equals whatever the file is. And it's also a good practice to type your sources, so then you can go type equals and specify what type of audio file it is, so the browser really does know, oh, this is the type of audio file I prefer, that's the one I'm going to use. And you can then put in fallback so that if their browser does not support HTML5 audio tags, it will just show up the text as the replacement for that. So you can put that in with it. But that's the HTML audio tag. It's just basic markup. We've attached an ID to it. So with the ID attached on it, then we're able to access it through our not through jQuery, but just through the JavaScript as part of it. Looking at the JavaScript, everything's wrapped up in the init function just so that it can be included in the head. If we didn't, we could just dump all of that at the bottom of the screen and we'd be good there. Within our init function now, I am first accessing my audio element and setting that equal to Thundercats to match the ID that I have attached on Thundercats. Then I'm accessing my 3 buttons, and we'll look at the differences between the buttons shortly. There's a play button, a pause button, and then what is in effect a toggle button. So the button can go back and forth as you press on it and update its status accordingly. So putting those objects into memory, down later on I have those objects where I am attaching event listeners to those objects, the event of click, and then going to call the respective functions associated with each one: music play, music pause, and music play pause, or music pp. So we have these 3 buttons. Have my event listener down here, and you can go refer to the link on event listeners if you're wanting to review a little bit more about how event listeners work and what they really mean and why we're using that, and why it's better than using the .onClick method, because it is generally a preferred way of doing it if you are using anything that is more kind of modern or forward thinking. So access my sound, access the objects, assign event listeners to the objects, and then I have the functions that are being called by those event listeners occurring up here. Now it's important because these are defined using variable or function expressions, so var, my function name, instead of just a function declaration, I do have to have these function expressions here and my assignment of event listeners afterward. Otherwise, when it assigns the event listener, if the function were listed after it in the script, the function wouldn't be in memory yet, so then it would fail. It'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's important to always remember that it's a good practice to then define all things that start with the word var first, and then start doing the other code that's going to be working with those, and then that will just give you a little better performance that way. So we'll start with the music play button here, and when I click on the music play button, or my play button, it calls the music play function. That will tell my sound object to play. And then I'm just tracing a message out to my console so I can verify that something did indeed happen. So if my sound is turned off or if something else breaks, I can at least see that that click event is being registered by the button. So that's why it's nice to just throw that little console statement in there. And this we'll get to in a little bit. That's tied to the other button. Forgot to comment that out previously. The pause button is now going to tell the audio to pause. The HTML audio tag does not have a stop behavior. It has a play behavior and it has a pause behavior, but it does not have a stop behavior. So we can tell the sound to pause or we can tell the sound to play. And when the sound is done playing, we can even do a check and say, is the sound paused? So we don't have to pause the sound, but if we have a sound object, we can then ask, is that sound paused? Meaning, is it playing or not? And if it's not playing, then we could tell it to play, and if it is playing, we can tell it to stop, which is what the music PP function then does. So to see this in action, we can see now on this page, if I hit the play button here, I'm going to refresh it so it's now what I was working on. It plays the music. I can hit pause and now it stops the music. And when I hit play again, we'll see that it is playing where it was paused from. Oh, I forgot to save that change. And you'll notice that then my text in my play pause button changes when that sound is done. So I forgot to save this little because I commented it out. So I'm also telling the sound to listen for being done, and when it's done, I just updated the text on the button of my play pause button to become play again. Looking at the play pause button, it's going to start out on the play pause button where it says play and pause. That will be the text on that button. So we can see that over here. It says play and pause. When I click on the play pause button, it queries, is my sound paused? Meaning it's not playing. If the sound is not playing, it tells the sound to play, and then it changes the text on the button to pause song. But if I click on the button when the sound is playing, it will tell it to pause, and then it will change it back to play song, so meaning the song is paused, so then it can now play. So to see that in action, so it can go back and forth and the button updates itself. There will be times where you will want to have a toggling style option for audio control versus having separated control. The key thing to remember here is we're telling sound to play or pause simply based on clicking of the button, but we could have any other code on your project. So if something is animating, and when an object animating has reached a certain coordinate, an X and Y position on screen, or when its X and Y has reached the same X and Y as something else, so a collision has occurred, when that collision occurs, then we could tell a sound object that we have to play. So you can add as many sound objects to your markup as you want. They don't show up unless you add controls to them. And then you can now tell all of these sounds to play when you need them to play. So it can be a very easy way to include lots of audio with your project without having to do complex HXR methods, so you don't have to then work on loading them purely through JavaScript. You can just reference them in your markup, and then when you need them, when that event in your programming determines a sound should be played, an object is animated off screen, an object has collided with something else, or when you press a mouse button and click on something exactly as we're doing here, we can just tell our sound to play. That's really all it takes. We can tell it to play. And if we want sound to stop, we issue a pause command. Some resources will also recommend, after you have loaded or created your sound object, which actually it would make sense to put it right here. Well, I would still prefer it down, but so we can see in relationship. But I would say something along the lines of, I have now accessed my sound object, and I'm going to issue an explicit pause command to that sound to guarantee it doesn't somehow start playing magically of its own accord. So some resources will direct after you have access to the object. So you've accessed it, whether you use getElementById or you use jQuery to access it. Once you've done that, then you issue a pause command to guarantee the sound is not playing until it gets a play command explicitly from your code. That would be a good practice. I don't know of any browsers that would automatically just start playing the sound, but this kind of helps to ensure that that doesn't occur, so you don't get weird spontaneous audio eruptions occurring in your project. So after much discussion, it makes sense to organize it. So we have our variable declarations of variable objects, our our function expressions. Then we start attaching in event listeners, of which we have event listeners for the buttons. I have my event listener for my audio object being done, and also then having in an event list, or the pause command to guarantee my object stops. So now I'm doing a method call. Writing it in this sequence makes it easier to find things in your code. And to that end, you might even then put in some demarcation where you have your variables of accessing all of your objects. You'd have your variables for any other kind of program variables, where if you're storing x's and y's and speeds and opacities, or all these kind of changing variables that you'd need, you'd have all of that first. Then you have your function expressions. Then you follow that up with your event listener. So you keep your code organized so you're not left wondering, oh, well, where is that, or is that even happening? Because if you keep things grouped together, it's often going to be easier to find them. So that would be my recommendation. But when we're working with the audio, you have your audio element that you put an ID on so you can find it. You list your source or sources for your audio. And then it's just a matter of accessing that by getElementById, and then we can issue in a play command and issue in a pause command. That's really, kind of all there is to it. Now we have other things where here we're listening for the audio to be done. So when the audio is ended, we can now make something else happen. In this case, it's just doing an anonymous function. It's not calling a function. It could call yet one more function, so we could write that out as a separate function. But it was just as easy to use an anonymous function and include that here.